So this has been a much requested video, but today we are taking the Sony ZVE10 Mark II and we're building it up into a cinema rig. So I think I've been asked over 50 times to build a cinema rig for the Sony ZVE10 Mark II, so that's what we're going to do today. I got a whole bunch of parts in front of me. It's actually not as much as many other rigs that I've put together, so it's relatively simple. This is not an affordable rig necessarily, but hopefully it can give you an idea of how you could customize it and make it your own if you want to make it a little bit cheaper. Now everything I talk about today is going to be linked obviously in the description down below. Those are affiliate links, so if you do use those, that really helps out the channel. That allows me to build these sorts of rigs for you guys so that you can learn about them for free. Before I get into the parts list, there's just a couple of little pieces that I think are worthwhile you picking up, no matter what kind of rig that you're building. First off, one thing that I'm just going to be using the whole way throughout this process is a little multi-tool. This is just a little Smallrig Film Riot collab multi-tool. It's got every single kind of screw and fitting that you will need to attach everything in this rig. It is super handy. Now, as for screws, I would highly recommend you just pick up a bunch of screws. You're going to need a handful of screws to put together any rig that you do. For this rig, you're going to need two different screws. So you're going to need a kind of longer tripod screw like that, and short ones. So you're going to need 4 of each of these. Again, I'll have them linked in the description down below. It'll be 8 screws altogether, and that's not including whatever tripod plate that you're going to be using, but that comes with screws anyway, so don't worry about that. First things first is we have the camera. Now, on the camera I have the Smallrig cage attached. I have an entire review about this cage. There's a couple of things I don't like about it, but overall I think it's a fantastic option. Now, on the bottom of this cage I have attached a little f38 quick release plate. Again, that's going to be linked down below, but that is going to just give us the opportunity to quick release from this little attachment here onto our whole rig, which will allow us to pop the camera on and off the rig super easily. This is an idea I got from Caleb Pike. He's kind of the goat of building cinema rigs, so you know, all props to him for this, so big fan of that. So yes, on the Sony ZVE10 we're going to start with the Smallrig cage and a little Falcam f38 quick release plate on the bottom. Now, before you keep panicking, as many people do whenever I make these videos, I will cover up the sensor with the lens. Now, this rig will work with any lens that you want to use. I'm going to use this. This is a new lens. This is the Sirui 20mm f1.8 anamorphic. So this is actually a 1.3 times anamorphic lens, and it's 20mm, which is very impressive. I'm going to save more thoughts on this lens for the future, other than to say I really like it. I think it's a really interesting option for many people, but a review is coming out on that I think next week. So if you want to see that, do hit the subscribe button. Also, if you haven't subscribed and you like these rig videos, please do subscribe. That means a whole lot. So as always, this is our base. You got a camera, a cage, and a lens. Everything gets attached to this. This is the core of every camera rig ever. So this is where we're going to start. Now, for the top handle and the side handle, what we're going to do is we're going to take this. This is a Nato rail over to a rosette mount. It's a little bit long. I wish it wasn't quite this long, but what we're going to do is we're going to attach this on top of the camera, just like this, and it is going to just sit as close over to the right as you can get it without blocking access to any of your buttons that you might need. This is just going to attach right on top. And to attach this, we're going to take 2 of our shorter screws and we're going to add them into 2 of the little 1/4-20 threads on top of the camera. Always try to use 2 screws as much as you can. If you only use 1 screw on any attachment, it's more than likely it's going to start to swivel. So 2 screws is always better. And that is going to look like this. So pretty simple, pretty, you know, it's just a Nato rail on the top for the top handle and then a rosette on the side. So I think it's pretty simple. Rosette's going to go on here. This is the side handle, and the top handle is going to attach onto the Nato rail. So for the top handle, what we're going to use is this. This is the Nitze Stinger. This is the little Stinger Mark II with the Nato attachment. So I also have a monitor mount attached on the front. This one I will leave in the description down below. The monitor that we're going to use comes with a monitor mount, but I actually just prefer this one, so, and I already had it. If you'd rather use the one that just comes with the monitor, you can do so. You'll just need to put a cold shoe mount on top of the handle instead of buying this monitor mount. So pretty simple there. But this just keeps it nice and low. I kind of like it when the handle's kind of high up and then the monitor is low down here. Sometimes people add the monitor up here and it sticks out really high at the top. Not a big fan of that. So all you got to do is take your top handle with your monitor mount and attach that onto the camera and get it nice and centered and lock it into place. And there we have that. It's pretty simple. nice little place to start. You got a nice little top handle. Top handles are great. I love a top handle. I also love side handles. And today we're going to be using this one by Kondor Blue. I love this handle. It's like a little pistol grip style handle with a nice big rubber attachment on the front, which feels really good to hold, and a rosette here on the side. So the rosette is just going to attach straight onto the camera. I like to have it at a slight angle, and there you have your side handle attached, which I think is really nice. I absolutely love this handle. It feels really good in the hands. It's a little expensive. I think it's like 80 bucks, which is quite a lot for a handle. So I'll leave a cheaper alternative down below, but I really like this one. And the nice thing about these sorts of handles and stuff is, granted, it's a lot of money to spend on a cheap camera like a ZVE10, but let's say you upgrade down the line to like an FX3, you can still use all of these pieces just on a more expensive camera. So it's always good to just invest in these kind of things if you're planning on getting into more videography down the line. So next up, let's go ahead and we're going to attach our monitor. This is a new monitor to me. This literally just arrived in the mail like 2 days ago. It's by Andycine, and it doesn't have a battery sled, which is a little bit unique, and some people might be panicking, but it actually has a built-in battery, which at full brightness, which is 1200 nits, which is great. At full brightness, it lasts for about 2 to 2.5 hours. Not a crazy amount of time, but it is so thin and the build quality is so nice. It's a really nice sort of metal design. It feels really good, and it's so slim. It takes up so little space, and it gives you a 6-inch screen. And if you are worried about the battery life, what we're going to be doing is we are going to be powering it over USB-C right here, which is a really simple, easy connection. Just to keep it powered, rather than having to use dummy batteries, which are a lot more expensive. And that is just going to attach onto our monitor mount on the front of the top handle. All of a sudden, we're really starting to get somewhere. It's starting to look like a cinema rig, which is always a good place to start, and it feels pretty good in the hands. Next, I'd recommend just to go ahead and attach your HDMI cable. This monitor comes with all the HDMI cables that you could need. It's got full-size to full-size HDMI, micro HDMI to full-size HDMI, and mini HDMI to full-size HDMI. We're going to use the micro HDMI to full-size. Now, this cage has a cable clamp, so do make sure that you use the cable clamp, because that's going to hold it all together. It's less likely to break your ports. Again, all of that information is in the full review of the cage. Get that locked into place again with your monitor mount. I like to wrap it around this top piece here, as you can see, just to sort of keep it a little bit neater. And then once you have your cables nice and organized, it's looking pretty good. And the really nice thing about this is I don't need to have a battery on here. Again, it just makes the rig so much lighter and smaller, and technically you're actually good to go. You got a good little rig here that can work pretty well. We're going to add our matte box on the front because we want our camera to look extra cool on set. Also, it's good for cutting lens flares if you ever want to, but most of the time it's kind of just to make your rig look cool, and I think that's okay. This is the matte box by Smallrig. It's their mini matte box, and it's super cheap. It's like 50 bucks. And I joke about it looking cool. I think it does look cool, but also if you ever are dealing with flares coming in that you don't want and you're like losing a lot of contrast in your image, you can use this top flag to try and cut that light, and that way it's going to help keep your image a little bit cleaner, so you can go in and add whatever other flares you might want to in post. So here we have the main rig, and already I think it is looking pretty good here. It's a pretty sweet looking setup, and it's really simple because you can just use the battery inside the camera and the battery inside the monitor, and you're good to go for a couple hours before you'd have to charge it up, which I think is pretty great. We are going to build an entire baseplate system onto this that is going to be quickly detachable, so that you can have this little run and gun rig, or like a much bigger rig that's going to work better on a tripod, or if you just want to have a little bit more weight to your camera. First things first, we're going to start with our baseplate. This is just a simple little baseplate by Smallrig, and it's really low profile, which is what I like. Because we're adding a quick release plate onto the baseplate, that actually raises the height of the camera quite a lot. So sometimes if you're using like a normal baseplate, your camera ends up being way too tall. So I kind of like to have this one here. This because it's so low profile. The rails sit super low. So what we're going to do is we're going to take our little Falcam quick release, and we're going to put it sideways, so the button's over on the side here, and it's going to attach on to the baseplate, kind of like this. Now for this one, you're going to need to use 2 of your longer screws. So not the shorter ones, but the longer ones, just because it's a little bit harder to reach those threads. And you'll end up with something that looks like this. Nice and simple. I like to have it where the little knobs are at the front, and this is actually closer to the back. Next, we're going to take this little Cheeseplate piece, and we're going to attach it onto our baseplate here in a second, but the Cheeseplate is going to act as our sort of attachment point for our battery sled. So we're going to be using this one. This is by Nitze. It is a very popular V-mount battery plate. You could also use an NPF plate, I'll show you why in just a second, but one of the problems with these small cameras is that whenever you open the monitor, if you want to have the monitor open so you can actually see it on the side of the camera, one of the problems with that is that a V-mount battery can't actually fit here, and it has the monitor kind of sitting kind of not straight, which can be really annoying. So what we're going to do is we're actually going to offset the battery a little bit and have it leaning slightly to the side. I realize that that might be really annoying to some people because it's not perfectly centered and it's not perfectly symmetrical, but it does allow us to use V-mount batteries, so that's kind of the trade-off for such a small camera like this. Alternatively, you could use an NPF plate. I've used those in a lot of other cinema rigs, so I'll link a video up in one of the corners so you can kind of see how that would work instead. What we're going to do is we're going to take our Nitze plate and we're going to be using these two little holes at the bottom, the two on the very edges. So this is where things just get a little bit complicated. Basically what we're going to do is we're going to take our remaining two long threaded, like our little long tripod screws, and they're going to go into these holes. So on the cheese plate, it's got this through hole at the bottom, which has that kind of sunken bit on one side. I'm going to turn that over, and on this side, the flatter side, you're going to put a screw in this hole, and you're going to put another one in there. Just like that. So these two screws, which are now coming out the other side of this cheese plate, those are going to go into the bottom of our V-mount plate. Again, it is going to leave it slightly uncentered, but you're going to have to deal with it if you want to build this rig. And this is what you're going to end up with. It's going to look something like this. Okay, I realize that that can bother a lot of people. That's not going to be centered, but you got those two screws going through here into the back of the V-mount plate, and it looks a little bit like that. Again, don't panic that this is offset. It actually doesn't look that bad in the end. Just letting you know. Right, now lastly, we're going to take this plate here that we've just put together. We're going to take the last two of our short tripod screws, and they're going to go through this hole right here. They're going to sit like that, and those two screws are going to go into these screws right here, right behind our quick release plate. It's going to sit like that. And this is what you end up with. You got your base plate here with our quick release for the camera. We got our 15mm rod base plate, which we're going to attach the rods here in a second, and our V-mount battery on the back, slightly offset to deal with the fact that the camera monitor can then be flush with the battery. So let's go ahead, we're going to attach our rails. The rails that I'm going to be using are these are two 6-inch rails by Kondor Blue. I really like the way that they look. Some people have said that they've had a problem with these bending. I think that's, you're just cranking it down way too hard. You don't need to go that crazy. Now, if you don't know what rails are for, there's a couple of accessories that can attach to rails. So if you're using a cinema lens that doesn't have autofocus, you might want to attach a follow focus system. Or if you have a really heavy lens, you might want to attach a lens support, and that stops the lens from drooping a little bit and helps keep the rig a little bit more secure. So we're just going to use these 6-inch rails, and then if you want to add any accessories in the end, you can, or if you want to get longer rails depending on what type of lens you have. So they are going to slide in here and go all the way to the back and hit this cheese plate. So as you can see here, you're just going to slot in and go all the way to the back, and they'll sort of click into place at the very back there. Tighten those down, and now we have a sweet looking little base plate. Last thing you got to do is whatever tripod that you're going to be using, take your tripod plate. So I'm just using a regular Manfrotto style tripod plate, and attach that onto the bottom of your 15mm rail plate. So you could use Arca Swiss, you can use Manfrotto, you could use whatever it is that you have. I'm not going to include this in the links down below because if you're building a cinema rig, you probably have a tripod. Just use the tripod plate that you got. Looking pretty good. All you got to do is take your battery. I have two V-mount batteries here that I quite like. First off, the Smallrig V99 Pro is just a fantastic battery. It's a little bit more expensive, but it's a fantastic battery. It just has so much information, so many outputs. You can charge it over USB-C. It's got this little locking cap on the top, which I don't see anybody talking about this, but the fact that that stays like locked into place, so you just have that open and you don't have to deal with any little flappy things, is awesome. So I love this battery. If you don't want to spend that much money, you could go with something like this one. This is just a simple 99 watt hour by KMTV. Again, it can be powered by over USB-C, which is really nice. But for this rig, any mini V-mount battery will work. Just the mini ones. If you want to go into the giant V-mount batteries, it is going to cause problems with your monitor, and you'd have to keep your monitor closed on your camera. So just be aware of that. So again, these are my two recommendations. I'm a big fan of both. I probably prefer the Smallrig one, but it is more expensive. But let's go ahead and attach that on. Super simple. It just attaches on there like that, and there we have it. So the really nice thing about this is instead of attaching all of our cables to the battery, we're going to attach it to the plate, which means that whenever we detach the battery, we don't have to unplug all the cables. We can just like swap the batteries, and then everything will keep running. And now all you got to do is take these two parts and you can just clip them together whenever you want to use it in the full big rig. So because we have this little quick release on the bottom of our camera here, and we have the quick release plate on here, all you got to do is line these two things up, and you're done. That's it. It's literally that simple. So we have the full rig, we have the half rig. This is just ingenious. I absolutely love how simple and easy that is. And just for 30 bucks extra to get that little quick release plate, I think this is so cool. Now, obviously, you still have to run your cables, and you're gonna have to detach some cables while you do this, but I think this is just ingenious. And it looks pretty good. I'm pretty happy with the way that this is looking. You can let me know what you think in the comments down below. But the last thing that we gotta add are our power cables. Now on this rig in particular, we only actually have to power 2 devices. That's the camera and the monitor. The monitor has a battery built in, so we're just gonna charge the monitor as we go, which means that when we detach it, all you have to do is unplug the USB-C and you're good to go. So to do that, we're gonna use this. This is actually for the Smallrig wireless autofocus system, but it's a pretty cheap little D-tap to USB-C power delivery cable. So all you gotta do is on the side of the Nitze power plate, and there's a D-tap port down here on the bottom. You're gonna take your D-tap and plug that in there. And manage your cables a little bit, try to keep it nice and neat as best as you can. So we have the USB-C cable going into the bottom of the monitor, and that is coming out of the D-tap here on the side. You can see that green light means that power is going to the monitor. So let me go ahead and power this on, just so you can see. So here we have our monitor. Obviously it's just a bright blue light on the screen because it is a really, really bright monitor. But basically when the USB-C cable is plugged in, it's going to charge the monitor, and whenever I detach it, say if I want to go for the smaller handheld rig, it's no longer charging, but it can still be powered, which is really, really nice. So for powering the camera, you have 2 options. And for me, I'd recommend picking up both of these options so that you have the flexibility depending on what it is you're wanting to do or what it is that you're shooting. If you want to leave it in this big rig all the time and you're not going to be detaching it or reattaching it, then what I would recommend is to get a DC, so a little DC plug like this, over to a dummy battery, and that is going to go into the camera. Now the reason that you would want to do this is because most of the overheating problems that come with this camera are because of the battery inside of the camera. The battery generates quite a lot of heat, and that makes the camera overheat. Whereas if you use a dummy battery, you're actually moving the heat from the battery inside the camera over to the battery outside of the camera, and that means that the ZVE10 just won't overheat, or at least in my experience, it makes it very, very difficult to make it overheat. I've never had it overheat at all, and I've done like 2-hour-long podcasts with this rig. So, if you're worried about overheating, this is the way to go. The only problem with this is whenever you get this all attached, it does mean that the quick release kind of system is a little bit more awkward because you got to take the dummy battery out of the camera, put your own battery in, and unplug the USB-C cable from the monitor. The other option would be to just do a USB-C cable, again from the Nitze plate straight into the camera, and keep the battery inside the camera. This means you're more likely to experience overheating, depending on how it is that you're filming or what it is that you're filming. If you're doing really long clips, this is not the way to go. But if you're doing lots of short little B-roll clips at a wedding or something like that, and you're not using this for like a long ceremony or anything like that, USB-C will be just fine. So you can either take the DC cable, this one here, and you're going to attach it on this side right above the D-tap port, because that is the 8-volt out. You don't want to plug it into the 12-volt DC port. So into the 8-volt DC port, and then that's just going to go straight into your camera, into your battery sled. Super, super simple. Now, if you want to do it over USB-C, which is kind of the way that I like to do it, again, because unless I'm recording like a podcast or something like that, or a ceremony, there's a little USB-C port on the side here, right up in there. Now the problem is the screen blocks it, so it's really difficult to access, but I found this little USB-C cable on Amazon, and it's got this super teeny tiny little ribbon end to it, which is really nice, and then the normal USB-C. So this is the one that I'm going to be using. Just take the little tiny ribbon end and attach that to the USB-C port right in there on the Nitze plate. Do a little bit of cable management as best as you can. We are running out of space here, but as best you can, do some cable management. And then all you got to do is plug the USB-C cable into your camera. So again, what this does is it just keeps the battery inside the camera charged, keeps it trickle charging. The really nice thing about doing it this way, again, if you're not concerned about overheating, it all depends on how it is that you're filming and what it is that you're filming. The nice thing about this is I can have the camera turned on, and I can turn the monitor on, and here I have this all working. But the nice thing is, if I want to, let's say this battery is dead and I want to swap over to this one instead, all I have to do is unplug this. Everything stays powered because it all has its own batteries. Swap this one back on, and then the device will keep charging both the camera and the monitor. Now again, just to say, I'm going to say it for the 5th time today, if you're concerned about overheating, use the dummy battery. if you aren't concerned about overheating, use the USB-C. I'd recommend trying both. The really nice thing about the USB-C system is what I tend to do with these sorts of rigs is I'll have the whole base plate on a tripod, and then if I want to go out and film something really quick, all I have to do is unplug two USB-C cables, the USB-C from the monitor, USB-C from the camera, and then I'm still rolling. I still got this working. I've got the battery here, and then I come back to the tripod, plug that back in, plug in my USB-C cables, and I'm good to go. Now, just to point out what I was talking about earlier, this is what it looks like for the battery to be offset at the back. It's actually not that drastic. It's not perfectly centered, but it does allow the monitor to sit right up against the battery, and I think it kind of works out fine. I know it's nicer to have it centered, but balance is still really good on this rig. It's relatively heavy, which is good for getting nice smooth footage, because this camera doesn't have any IBIS in it, so you want to be able to have a slightly smoother footage, which weight helps with that. But overall, I'm pretty happy with this rig. Real quick, what I want to do before anybody else gets to it in the comments section is let's talk about who should do this, why and when. Building a cinema rig like this is expensive. If you put all of this in your Amazon cart all at once, excluding the camera and the lens, this is the total price right here. That's a lot of money for a cinema rig for a cheap camera. There are benefits that come with a rig. Okay, first off, having a monitor on the top is really, really handy, especially when I'm using an anamorphic lens. I can de-squeeze the image straight onto the monitor, which is nice. I get to use my matte box for dealing with flares. Handles just make it a lot more comfortable, but also the added weight makes for much smoother footage, which is really important, especially with a camera like this that doesn't have any IBIS in it. And lastly, battery life. Or if you're using the dummy battery, no overheating, which is a big deal for these sorts of cameras. So those are maybe some of the reasons why you might want to do something like this, but something's really important to know about that price, right? That amount of money that you're going to be spending on a rig like this is that all of these pieces that you buy, you can use on any other camera that you graduate to. So for example, if you build this rig for the ZVE10 Mark II, and then you end up upgrading in a year to an FX3, right? Much more expensive camera and much more worthy of being rigged up at this sort of price point. You can just take all of these parts, except for the cage. You'll just need a cage specific to whatever camera you upgrade to. You can take all of these parts and build that rig for that camera instead. You take it with you. You don't need to buy it for every different camera. So all of these parts, whenever I went to build this whole rig for this camera, I spent 80 bucks because I had everything else, except for the monitor. Now, Andycine did send me the monitor, and they just reached out and asked if I'd be interested in checking it out, and it might be my new favorite monitor. But I didn't have to spend a lot of money because I already had the handle, I already had the matte box, I already had the VMI batteries, I already had the plate, I already had the base plates and the rails and all of those things from all of my previous rig builds. So you don't have to go out and buy new stuff every single time you get a new camera, which is really, really nice. Anyway, all that to say, I do it because I find it fun, and you guys seem to enjoy it. So let me know what your thoughts are in the comments down below. What do you think of this rig? Do you like it? Do you not? Do you think it's a waste of time, waste of money, all that kind of stuff? Let me know. But I hope you've enjoyed the video. If you have, hit the like button, drop a comment down below, or maybe even subscribe as we continue to build this channel. I appreciate all of you for doing so, and I hope that you have a wonderful day.